Hello, and welcome to Salina Media Connections online Zoom interview program. We've got a great interview for you today with Kansas Farmers Union President Donn Teske. Donn farms northeast of Manhattan in a grain and mostly cow-calf operation. He served as National Farmers Union President for 19 years. Including a term with the National Farmers Union as Vice President for 4 years and as Treasurer for 3 years. We've been hearing a lot about COVID-19, and today we're going to take a look at its impact on rural Kansas and some other issues related to rural Kansas. Welcome, Donn.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for asking me on.
So let's start out, Donn, by talking a little bit about what's been happening out in rural Kansas. You know, we heard prior to this virus issue popping up, we heard that low farm prices were kind of bringing back some of the same issues of the 1980s. What's the story there?
That's very much so, and I, from record high prices in 2013, it's been downhill ever since. And us old timers have been through this cycle before. What really is rough is on the young lions that seen an opportunity to actually get into agriculture and have a quality of life that would be comparable to their urban counterparts, and they made the big jump, and no more than they made the big jump than the prices crashed and they stayed crashed. And so it's been below production level for some time, and we've been seeing them come in with market facilitation programs to try and offset some of that, but it certainly hasn't worked very well. And my passion in dealing with farm crises in the past, when I was with farm analyst, and I've had a real passion for the availability of rural mental health counseling, and so I was happy to see that America was starting to recognize that, and that is an issue. And then Senator Moran co-sponsored the Farmers First Act, or whatever that was called, but that got $10 million appropriated in the Farm Bill. And so I was involved in Kansas in trying to get that money out to where we could develop programs to offer assistance similar to what the FACTS program had back when Charlie Griffin was doing it for the FACTS program. You really need an ag guy in that kind of a scenario that understands a farmer. Farmers' rural mental health issues are so much different than someone that's not in that situation, where they have the obligation to their ancestors and multi-generation farms and the responsibilities. It's all tied to that. And so I was excited about that, and glad we were taking steps, and then it got downgraded to $2 million a year through appropriations. Well, even that hasn't been distributed yet. So with the relocation,
now,
I'm sorry?
And it might not be now, huh?
And it may not be now. And so a lot of that at that time, they were blaming on the fact of the relocation to Kansas City and so much of the staff that didn't make the transition and being swamped, and that may very well be so. Senator Booker introduced, and it was passed to reappropriate it up to the $10 million. That was a good thing. Hang on a second. And so now we're still waiting on the money. And so now with the virus outbreak and what we have going on now, the farm economy and addressing the farmers' real needs are pretty small compared to all the pressure and anxiety that all of America is feeling. So I worry that the steps that have been taken up to this point to address the rural mental health issue is just going to get absorbed into the entire thing or lost. And so that's one of the fallouts that I'm afraid is going to happen with this virus outbreak. Of course, none of us know what's going on with the virus thing, so we don't even know what our world's going to be like afterwards. And I worry about the economy, of course, and I worry about the increased federal debt, and I worry about my family, and I worry about our health, and I worry about my mother and the rest home. And so I'm just like everyone else out there. I'm just hanging close to home and feeding my cows and waiting for things to move ahead.
So Kansas and several other states are under a social distancing kind of program. In Salina, people are trying to stay 6 feet apart. In rural areas, you're usually more than 6 feet apart most of the time. How's that impacting rural Kansas?
Yeah, I jokingly tell people my cows can't tell any different. Farming's kind of going on as usual. This is a busy time of the year, but it's deeper than that. And you know, my wife has to go to work every day. She works in a hospital, and she's the first one exposed to patients coming in, and so you worry about that. But what I kind of would farmers are used to working by themselves. Farmers are used to being responsible for their own actions, but at the same time, they seem to have more of a sense of community spirit. And so I think that the interactions you have at worship service, the interactions you have at school activities, the interactions you have at community events is really important in rural communities. And so with that going by the wayside, the isolationism just gets deeper. And I worry about the structure that supported that up to this time being there in the future, because our local church, I'm on the finance board, and of course contributions have dropped to nothing, and still we have obligations and expenses just like every household and just like every farm. So how our churches weather this, how our school systems weather it, that's all going to be something we're all going to learn together.
And how's that impacting the social network of communities? People kind of getting together for things if they no longer do that very often.
Yeah, that's right. And I was on a Zoom conference call, and one of the participants said this would be a really good time to invest in Zoom. I have to reflect on how we've all adapted pretty well with the social opportunities we have through the internet to still stay in contact with each other. Even Facebook has some type of a therapeutical aspect to it, at least social interaction. And what would happen if the internet goes down? People would have to be forced to read a book then.
You have any good suggestions on books to read?
I just finished David Sedaris's Calypso, and I've enjoyed reading him in the past, but he's really opened up his heart and soul on that one, and he's funny in the process. So I went through it 3 times.
Earlier on you mentioned something about beginning farmers and facing some of the farm price issues that we have today. I understand you've been involved with a program that provides an opportunity for veterans to get started in farming. How's that been going?
Yeah, that's I've had the opportunity and sometimes the challenges of serving on the executive board of the National Farmer Veteran Coalition. And I represent National Farmers Union on that board and have for, well, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary of the organization. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. But it's grown to the level now that we had 900 in attendance in Austin in November. And most of them are veterans interested in getting into farming. And it's got some real benefits in helping with some stipend grants and education processes and connections and that kind of thing. And we're funneling about $3 million a year right now through that organization to help veterans that are trying to get into farming. And it's really rewarding in the fact that you go to the conferences, that how many of them have strikingly physical disabilities and PTSD, and it's a good thing to be doing. If anybody's interested in that, website is farmvetco.org. So farmvetco.org is the website, and it's entirely run on donations. And so whatever we can do is being donated by private foundations and corporations.
Let's shift our emphasis here a little bit, Donn, to the impact or some of the programs that relate to farms and rural communities as a result of COVID-19. What's going on there?
Of course, stimulus package that was just passed has a significant amount in it for agriculture. 14 billion to replenish the CCC fund, another 9.5 billion that's got a lot of USDA discretionary ability to target specialty crops and et cetera, because we can see that one aspect of agriculture that has been growing rapidly has been direct sales, value added, know your farmer, direct marketing, and especially those that sell through farmers markets right now are just going to take a horrible hit. And so this is kind of a burgeoning industry that's a good thing, and it's good for consumers, and it's good for producers willing to go to the extra effort to make a little more on what they do. That would hate to see that taken down in this crisis. And so those are good things. You know, on the state legislature side, there was a raw milk bill this year that was really going to remove that opportunity. And
so now, for those that don't know what raw milk is, what's the difference between raw milk and what you can get in the grocery store?
Okay, raw milk is right from the cow, right out of the bulk tank. I milked for 20 some years, and we drank right out of the bulk tank the whole time, and that's pretty good milk. What you have to buy in a store has been pasteurized and a lot of it homogenized too. But historically, raw milk sales has been a very small area, and they didn't allow any advertising of it, and so if a person wanted to drink raw milk, they could go out to a dairy farmer's farm and buy it from him, and everybody kind of got along that way. Well, last year there was a court case that I believe it was on the First Amendment, got the labeling laws got struck down. And so all at once, the milk industry seen raw milk producers having an opportunity to advertise more. They worried that would allow more opportunities for liability, and if there would be a disease outbreak because of some bad milk, that would reflect on the entire dairy industry. And so they introduced Senate Bill 300 into the legislature this year, which would outlaw all sales of raw milk. And then Department of Agriculture came in and brought in Senate Bill 308, which was introduced, which was would have really restrictive labeling laws, but would still allow it. Kansas Farmers Union got involved, other groups got involved, and to their credit, they came out with 308. They came out of conference that toned down the labeling, that still required the labeling and advertising, but at a level that producers could do it and economically afford to do it. And so it still hasn't passed yet, with the legislator sitting in limbo, but it's there ready to be. And actually, if it doesn't even happen, as long as 300 doesn't get enacted, raw milk producers will still have the opportunity to sell some milk off the farm.
So you spent some time in Topeka kind of working on some of these issues. What's been going on there this year?
It's been pretty low key. There was so much focused on the budget, school funding, and Medicaid expansion that the agricultural sectors that we generally watch out for has been pretty low key this year. I think Kansas Farmers Union policy supports Medicaid expansion, and even more so now with the virus outbreak, that's something that Kansas should have available. And to that segment of our population that falls in that gap, that's a disservice that we should be offering. And quite frankly, the Medicaid expansion was held up by one person, and she is using it as blackmail because she wants an abortion bill passed. And so it's really something that one person is in a position to stop something that 86% of Kansans want to see go through. And that's sad.
In regard to, I want to go back to farm prices. Cattle prices dropped yesterday, I think it was, on the futures market, the limit, $4.50. And I don't think cash prices are going down like that, but they have been bouncing around. Meats disappeared off the shelves of the grocery stores. What's been happening in your estimation with why we're seeing this big drop in cattle prices and at the same time this surging demand for meat in the supermarkets?
Yeah. It's I had a good friend that sold calves last weekend, and she said they brought one half of what they brought in 2013 when cattle prices were at their peak. That it's dropped 25% just recently. They're talking about trying to target some of the stimulus package toward livestock producers, and there's some irony in that, in the fact that the processing industry is receiving record profits right now. I've seen over $500 a head profit that the processors are realizing from this, while where prices on the farm weren't good before, and now they're dropping 25% already, and now they dropped the limit yesterday, you said. And
Have
so
farmers ever received $500 profit on their animals?
no.
I think if it ever got up to 100%, that was a really high marker for livestock.
Yep. And so they anyhow they you know, the federal government may very well come in and do some support to livestock producers in a roundabout way. All that's doing is subsidizing JBS out of Brazil because they're making record profits. They're not paying the farmers for the record profits, so the government has to step in and keep food on the table. That's a little hard to take for an independent old farmer to have to put up with, and we shouldn't have an industry that is so concentrated that they can do that. But we do in all sectors now. It isn't just beef; it's pork and dairy and poultry and so even dairy. So it's really sad to see how agriculture has evolved over the years. And you know, a lot of farmers had hope after Teddy Roosevelt came in and did the trust busting, and we kind of hoped that would happen again during the Obama administration, and he gave it a shot. But when it got time to carry through with it, he caved. So I don't know what it would take to actually get farmers actively engaged enough in today's society that we could force change.
So what's Farmers Union doing about this?
Well, we do a lot of watchdogging, we do a lot of bitching, and then as a national organization, we have a full staff on the Hill trying to help work through things. And a lot of this stimulus package that was just passed so quickly, you know, a lot of us just figured it'd go to big corporations. By the time it got done, it's better than I thought it would be. And that was the involvement of Farmers Union on the Hill. That was the involvement of Farm Bureau on the Hill, and all the engaged participants. But if you don't have an organization like that that can speak for you on the Hill, then you don't have any voice. And so that's the importance of the farm organizations and belonging to them, and how important NFO is trying to market collectively so they can help the farmers and producers, and that's all things that are really needed.
So Don, we're kind of running out of time here. What other issues or questions would you like to comment on?
I just hope everybody's staying isolated and staying healthy, and give your loved ones a hug that you can. We had our grandbaby number 9 last week, and it was pretty cool. But at the same time, we couldn't be at the hospital. We had to Zoom with them.
So
We
you're getting
still
pretty
wanted to
good.
spend some quality time with the new granddaughter. I'm sorry.
I say you're getting pretty experienced at zooming around.
Yeah, aren't we all? Yeah.
So how does Farmers Union do business during these times?
Okay. Kansas Farmers Union, it's kind of business as usual for us because we have an office manager, but the staff has all been working remotely anyhow. So, you know, what's bad is events that we've had planned and we've had to cancel, and we don't know when we can feel comfortable starting to replan events and getting them on the calendar. We should be now for summer tours and summer events, and we don't know what to do quite yet. And so we're still staying active with weekly staff calls and and we're kind of going on business as usual. But our outreach to our membership and to agricultural Kansas is challenging now, and everybody's got more survival issues on their mind right now anyhow. So it's like, how can we as a farm organization help our membership base cope through these times? And you know, we together we're always better. And that doesn't matter if you're farmers union or if you're your local community or the state of Kansas or the federal government. If we work together, we're better off. And maybe the one good point of this virus outcome would be more working together. I've seen people worrying about other people now a lot more. I've seen families starting to pay more attention to family responsibilities where we're homebound, and there are some good things that can be coming out of this. And so we'll see what happens in the future with it.
Donn, you mentioned, I got one more question here. You mentioned that your wife worked at the hospital. We're hearing a lot about different things that are happening in hospitals or not happening and should be happening, mostly outside of Kansas. But what kind of insight can you give us on a small rural hospital and those kinds of issues?
They're taking adequate steps to protect their workforce as much as they can and protect the other patients that come to the hospital. And Onega Community Hospital is actually a pretty large hospital for a small community, and then has 7 satellite clinics around northeast Kansas. And they've done really well by funneling potential cases. Everybody gets their temperature taken when they come in. They were all asked a series of questions, and they're doing everything they can to try and keep the virus contained as much as possible. We haven't had an outbreak in our hospital system, to my knowledge, yet, but it's going to happen, and we all know it.
How large is Onega? What's the population?
Population of Onega is 900 people.
900.
But with the hospital, it's a community-owned hospital with a board of directors. There floats between 400 and 600 employees at the hospital, with all the satellite clinics around northeast Kansas. So it's that's one of those things where it's been some years ago now, maybe 10 years. I don't know. As we age, time flies, but it was time for a new hospital, and we all knew it. And you know, they just was open about it all and did informative events, and it new hospital passed at an 86% vote approval, and we have a brand new $19 million hospital there.
How are they doing on supplies and equipment?
How are they doing on supplies and equipment, Ma?
So far, we're doing okay.
She says okay.
We just purchased 2 new
Ventilators?
Portable ventilators.
How many?
2
Oh,
new
2 of them.
ones. Yes,
For Onega.
but they won't keep someone in our hospital. We would transfer them on.
Oh,
So
Really?
yes,
Hmm.
they would need to be in ICU, and we would have to. I mean, we would keep them as long as we needed to until a bed would come available, but we would have to transfer them to a bigger facility.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And we do have ventilators in our surgery departments, and so we do have more than just those 2.
Well, your work is certainly appreciated. So
Well, thank you.
you're on the front lines on this issue.
Yep. They
So
are.
Donn, thank you much for the words of wisdom.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you doing this interview, and we'll be in touch another time, I'm sure.
Thank you.